Morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our County Board of Canvassers elections meeting. Today's date is May 29, 2025. The time is 10 a.m. In attendance are Commissioners Eberline, Duncan, and Matari. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Public comment. Hearing none, we'll move to our one and only business item. Canvass of May 20th, 2025 consolidated election pursuant to Idaho Code 34-1205. It's an action item. And do you want to start, Clerk Locke?
I will start and say we had a successful election. We had the highest ballots cast in the whole state. We beat Ada and Canyon County, and ASA will continue that. I want to thank all our poll workers. We had over 400 poll workers work this election, and I also want to thank my election staff. We couldn't do this election in Kootenai County without the staff here and also the poll workers, and I would say it was another successful election that we carried out. So thank you, staff. We have two of our staff members here, Angela and Christy, and then Asa, our election manager, too.
All right. Well, good morning, Commissioners. I'd like to start with the Canvas narrative that we have provided you. It was emailed yesterday, and then also there's a paper copy at each of your desks. So let's dive right in, and then from there I'll go on to our Canvas report and talk about some of the results and outcomes. So starting out, we always have to verify the accuracy of our tabulators. That's required by Idaho Code, and it's also a best practice on top of that. So myself and Christy, our election supervisor, tested all three of the DS850 digital scan ballot tabulators, which are our central count tabulators, and a DS300 precinct counter, which we use at early voting on May 2nd. Witnessing the test were County Clerk Jennifer Locke, Commissioner Eberline was there, and Chief Deputy Clerk Grace Blomgren was there as well. And pursuant to Idaho Code, we had done that public logic and accuracy test, but we also previously had done internal testing utilizing a test deck of 615 ballots. That was conducted prior to the public test to ensure that every ballot style in every precinct and every oval were being correctly read by the tabulators. So while our public test doesn't require us to do that large of a test deck, we always are making sure we're testing everything ahead of time ourselves. The DS850 machines were tested again in the morning on Election Day prior to any ballots being run. That was on May 20th. And the tabulator we utilized for the absentee tabulation on Election Day was then reprogrammed to be able to be used for election night precinct counting. And so it was tested again after that reprogramming for Election Day. And then after all the voting was done, after all the ballots were counted, we test all the tabulators again in the evening on May 20th. We did that again, and in every test for our logic and accuracy, everything matched 100%. So we mark that test deck internally ourselves. It's not created by an outside party, so we know exactly how those ballots should be read, and we ensure that they are read that way every time. The first set of unofficial results was posted to the Idaho State Results site around 8:18 p.m. on May 20th. These results included all of the early voting results, which were exported from the DS300 precinct counter used during early voting, and part of the absentee voting results, which were exported from the DS850 central count tabulator that we utilized to count those absentee ballots. The next set of results was posted at 8:45 p.m. and included the remainder of the absentee ballots. And the reason that we had two different postings is we have absentee ballots able to be returned all the way up until 8 p.m. So we wanted to get the bulk of the results out there for the public to see, and then we got the last portion out as well by 8:45. The first results posting for Election Day ballots was conducted at 10:13 p.m. and included 36 of the 74 voting precincts. The remaining Election Day precinct results were posted at 11:11 p.m., and the final unofficial election results, including ballots that had to be adjudicated for unclear marks, blank ballots, or overvotes, were posted at 11:20 p.m. And I'd like to pause and I would like to contrast that to the last couple election cycles we've had in odd years. In May and November of 2023, our final postings were at 11:51 and 11:53 p.m. respectively on our live results site through the state. And then we had a smaller write-in race in November of 23 where we got those write-in results posted at 12:04 p.m. and I'll talk about our write-ins this time here in a moment. And then in 2021, when we had much less turnout than we did this time, our results in May were posted at 12:36 a.m., and then in November, our results were posted at 1:42 a.m. So we are trying to continually improve our processes to be as efficient as possible with these results postings. Part of the reason we did go a whole hour and a half between the absentee final posting and the first election day one was we were trying to get as many ballots, as many precincts counted as we could to give a good chunk of the votes to the voters. And also, we had a write-in this time, which I'm about to talk about, that required a lot of staff time to tally. And so the bigger chunk of precinct ballots we could get to start that tallying, the more effective that could be. So the overall unofficial election results PDF, including the tally of the write-in votes, was posted to the Kootenai County website at around 1:30 a.m. on May 21st. We had over 5,600 write-in bubbles that were read by the machine that we had to go visually look at every write-in line and say, yes, this is an eligible write-in, no, this is not. And I'll talk about that more toward the end here in some of the unusual factors in the selection. The unofficial precinct by precinct election results PDF was posted online to the Kootenai County website in the afternoon on May 21st, as is our normal practice. Including absentee and early voting totals, there were 24,076 votes cast in the election. With the 622 election day and early voting registrations included, the voter turnout averages 21.8%. Turnout percentages varied by precinct from a low of 9.6% in precinct 413 to a high of 40.2% in precinct 301. Early voting and absentee ballots that were tallied by the counting machines totaled 1,748 and 4,375 ballots, respectively. Absentee ballots are run by the tabulator, or run through the tabulator by precinct, and then the ones that come in on Monday and election day are run by batch, which enables us to track the exact count of the ballots received, and everything matched exactly what we were expecting. Ballots cast by ballot style were matched against machine tallies and the e-poll books. There were small discrepancies on election day in precincts as addressed below, which now I'm going to go into that here as soon as I talk about our staff and early voting. During early voting, our staff, temps, and poll workers used ballot on demand to print voters' ballots and used the DS300 precinct counter to receive and count those ballots. We had 1,748 ballots cast, with additional ballots spoiled by voters and reissued. Staff members, I always want to thank our staff and the other county staff that comes over and helps us on election night. We could not do it without the staff we have at elections and without the other county employees. Everyone is really a huge help. They make my job possible. They make Jennifer's job possible. I can't run 3 tabulators by myself. It's not humanly possible, nor do I want to attempt it. And so without Christy and Angela, who both were running tabulators on election night, and the remainder of our staff as well, we couldn't do this. So I would like to thank them for all their hard work, and they continue to dedicate their time to our community. We had 397 poll workers working this election as well, and again, we could not do this without them. As Jennifer said, we really appreciate them. It takes truly everyone to make this work. And if, to those listening, if you're interested in being a poll worker, we can always use more, so, you can apply online at our website, but we really appreciate every poll worker and every staff member. Of 17,953 election day ballots cast, 99.99% had 0 ballot issuance errors. 65 of the 74 voting precincts had 0 ballot issuing errors. Precincts 205, 309, 415, 419, 517, 518, 519, 520, and 521 had 3 ballot styles for this election. 31 precincts had 2 ballot styles, and the remaining precincts had 1 ballot style for this election. The following precincts made balloting errors on election day. Precinct 205 gave one 205N ballot voter a 205D ballot instead. Precinct 418 gave one voter who should have received the 418W ballot a 418E ballot instead. And then precinct 515 gave one 516F ballot voter a 515F ballot, and 515 and 516 vote at the same location, so that's how that was possible. Additionally, a few precincts had a difference in total election day ballots cast from e-poll book check-ins. These errors are as follows. Precinct 314 gave out an extra 314N ballot. There were 2 blank ballots cast for this ballot style. And the reason that I'm about to talk about why there are blank ballots or not is there's the potential, of course, most of these we expect that when the ballots were handed out, 2 were stuck together, and that's how an extra one was handed out. If there is a blank ballot, it's likely then that the voter didn't even know they had 2 ballots, voted it, and it was just cast like that. Precinct 316 gave out 1 extra 316J ballot. There were no blank ballots cast for that ballot style in that precinct. Precinct 322 gave out an extra 322C ballot. There was 1 blank ballot cast for this style. Precinct 409 gave out 1 extra 409C ballot. There was 1 blank ballot cast for this ballot style. Precinct 504 gave out 1 extra 504F ballot. There was 1 blank ballot cast for this ballot style. Precinct 507 had 1 fewer ballots cast than voters checking into the e-poll book. And the best thing that we can guess there is that potentially someone checked in and had an emergency or something where they had to run out the door. We talked to the judge at that precinct. They don't remember anything unusual, but there was 1 fewer ballot cast than voters checking in. And then precinct 516 gave out 1 extra 516F ballot, and there was a blank ballot cast for that ballot style. It's important to note that none of these differences affected the outcome of any contests on the ballot, and I'll talk about the results of some of those contests here in a minute when we go through the canvass report. 1 precinct correctly spoiled a wrong ballot prior to it being cast by the voter and gave that voter the correct ballot, so they caught the error before it fully happened. Now let's talk about election day registrations. Of 622 early voting and election day registration forms, there were 43 missing required items on the registration forms. Some registration forms contain multiple missing items, so that doesn't mean there were 43 forms actually missing information. Correspondence is sent by our office after each election to voters to obtain the missing information on the registration forms. And it's worth noting that each of these voters still had to provide acceptable photo ID and acceptable proof of residency pursuant to Idaho code. It's just in many cases the information missing on the registration form, which is required to be completed by state law, was entered in the e-poll book system but was just not completed on the paper form. The missing items are described as follows. Missing the answer to the checkbox at least 18 years old on election day, 18. Missing date of birth, 9. Missing the answer to are you a U.S. citizen question, 11. Missing the answer to legal disqualifications question, 2. Missing residence time in Idaho, 3. What I would also like to point out, because we did spend a lot of time training and practicing on this with our poll workers in training this election, is that there were no cards missing a driver's license or last 4 of the social. There were none missing gender, no missing signatures, no missing address issues, and no missing the name of the voter. And that's really important. Additionally, we did have 12 voters that had something updated in the poll book, but they were missing a registration form entirely. We looked at those individually and we found that while we still, of course, need a form, most of those changes were a change to a mailing address, a change to a party affiliation. They weren't actual people that had moved or changed a name and truly needed to re-register on election day itself. So we'll still correspond with those voters, but it's worth noting that those were more minor items, again, that were missed. With 24,076 ballots cast in this election in total, our staff and poll workers did an exemplary job processing voters and running an efficient and secure election process. We did have one specific unusual factor in this election, which was the presence of a county-wide write-in candidate for hospital trustee. That led to a large amount of write-in votes cast in that contest and meant that additional staff time was required for the assignment of those write-in votes. The DS850 and DS300 tabulators can detect the presence of the filled-in oval next to the write-in line and can tally this oval as filled in, but staff must still determine if the name written is that of an eligible write-in candidate. The write-in board was able to assign early voting and most absentee write-in votes prior to the tabulation of Election Day ballots, which saved time during the night. However, the volume of write-in votes from Election Day balloting required staff to stay an additional 2 hours after all Election Day ballots were counted in order to complete the review of the write-in votes and post these results to the website. Staff reviewed a total of 5,661 write-in votes, and a breakdown of the write-in totals is attached to the Canvas report. And then briefly, I'd like to cover our absentee ballots that were received not valid. As the commissioners know, we signature verify every absentee ballot that comes back into our office, and it must match what's on file from the voter's registration. If it does not match, we contact the voter. They have a chance to come in with their photo ID and re-sign in our presence and show that ID. So this election, we had 131 total not valid absentee ballots. 118 of those were not valid simply because they arrived after Election Day. They arrived late. 2 were missing a signature entirely, and the remaining 11, the signature did not match and was not cured by voters before Election Day at 8 p.m. So now I'd like to dive into the Canvas report, and then once we do that, I'll show the breakdown of the write-in votes as well on the screen here. So you have a nice thick packet of Canvas report, and I have it up here on the screen as well. I'm not going to go through every contest, but I would like to highlight a couple of our closer ones and a couple that are of interest. So the first one I'd like to highlight is the Consolidated Free Library Trustee race. The reason I'm highlighting this is because, once again, as continues to be a question among our voters, the citizens who live in the city of Coeur d'Alene do not get to vote on this contest because the city library is city governed and is not part of this network. So that's always a question we have. We didn't get as many questions this election. People are starting to understand that process a little more. And this race was one where we did see a lot of votes cast. There was about just under a 2,500 vote margin between Miss Bauman and Miss Lippert in the results, and then you can see the over and under votes cast as well. And then if you will go down actually to the next page, to page 4 with me, the East Side Highway District Commissioner Subdistrict 2. This was our closest race on the ballot in terms of results and outcome. Mr. Booth received 780 votes, Mr. Votter received 772 votes, and then there were 0 overvotes and 227 undervotes. So that is an 8-vote margin. I would like to mention that of those wrong ballots that were handed out by the precincts, 2 of those are voters that contained this race. So again, not enough to impact the outcome of the election, but I wanted to make that clear on the record. But this was our closest race on the ballot. And then if you'll go with me actually all the way to the very end here, I would like to cover our voting stats, because I think that is really important. So we're going to go all the way to page number 22. This is where it starts. So our voting statistics, again, this format is set out by the state in regards to how we treat our registration numbers and our election day registrations, and then our turnout percentages based on that. So you can see what we noticed on election day throughout the day, and what is very obvious in the results, where the turnout was highest. And what we found this time is the turnout was highest where Lakeland School District's levy was on the ballot specifically. Post Falls also had a relatively decent turnout. They were around the midpoint of our turnout results in the 20s percentile. And then outerlying areas that did not have a question on the ballot and voters in the city of Coeur d'Alene, most of the Coeur d'Alene precincts were lower than our average turnout. So you can see that it very much was a geographical split for a lot of our precincts this election. And then of course on page 24, our total turnout listed there of 21.8%. And with that, I would like to pull up those write-in vote totals really quickly. And then, I apologize for not having this open in advance here. I will get that up here. And then we're going to go to this. So, and I'm specifically bringing this up for the contest that did have the write-in candidates. So we had 2 of them this time. So the first one is that Kootenai Hospital District Trustee Contest. Again, we had 5,661 write-in votes cast. 5,426 of those were for the eligible write-in candidate Terry Seymour. The remaining 235 were for not eligible names, and so they're listed as unassigned. It is important to note in Idaho, candidates who wish to be a write-in must actually file paperwork to be a write-in candidate in order to be eligible to receive votes. So Mickey Mouse can never receive votes in Idaho because he's not an eligible write-in. The other contest that had write-in candidates was the Green Ferry Water and Sewer Director, seat 3. The write-in for this race received 31 total ballots cast. 23 of those were for Mr. Netzel. 5 were for Mr. Utz, because we did have 2 write-ins for this seat. And then the remaining 3 were again for not eligible names, so they are unassigned. So while neither of the none of the 3 write-in campaigns was successful in terms of getting elected, they certainly received more volumes of votes than we commonly see for write-in candidates.
22, yeah.
And with that, if the board has any questions, I would be happy to answer those.
I just also want to note when I
Yes.
mentioned earlier about Ada County and Canyon. So Ada County turnout was 21,535. Canyon turnout this election was 11,989 turnout. Kootenai County was 24,076 turnout. So again, we had the highest turnout votes cast in the state. So we are seeing time and time again, not every election, but Kootenai County has one of the highest turnout in the states overall.
Well, we'll have to question the folks down south as to why that is, especially with
It's
larger
always a competition
populations.
with Ada and Canyon and Kootenai, so.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments up here? Clearly, you all do a fantastic job. So, thank you. And unless there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to accept the canvas.
I move that we accept the canvass for the May 20th, 2025 consolidated elections pursuant to Idaho Code 34-1205.
Second.
Commissioner Eberline,
Aye.
Commissioner Duncan.
Aye.
Chair Matari.
Aye, motion carries. Next up, thank you, is public comment. Hearing nothing, 10:21, meeting adjourned.